Acts 24, starting in verse 1. And after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders with a certain attorney named Tertullus. Yep. And they brought charges to the governor against Paul. And after Paul had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying to the governor, Since we have through you attained much peace, and since by your providence reforms are being carried out for this nation, we acknowledge this in every way and everywhere, most excellent Felix, with all thankfulness. But that I may not weary you any further, I beg you to grant us, by your kindness, a brief hearing. For we have found this man a real pest and a fellow who stirs up dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and the ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. And he even tried to desecrate the temple, and then we arrested him. And we wanted to judge him according to our own law, but Lysias, the commander, came along, and with much violence took him out of our hands, ordering his accusers to come before you. And by examining him yourself concerning these matters, you will be able to ascertain the things of which we accuse him. And the Jews also joined in the attack, asserting that these things were so. I'm going to stop there. Sorry for the clumsy reading. I don't know what was going on there with it. And by the way, I'm just curious. In verse 6 through the beginning of verse 8, you guys have like bracket or a parenthetical or something like that?
Mine's omitted.
And yours is omitted, right?
Yeah, I go straight from 6
Right.
to 8.
Yeah, that is, sometimes that happens where older manuscripts of text weren't found in certain copies of the scrolls or the scripts. And so sometimes they determine, well, it's in newer copies. We'll go ahead and just keep it in, and they'll write it, but they'll put some kind of annotation, like mine has, okay? Or they'll leave it off saying these verses are not here, because there's a doubt about that piece of scripture.
Usually mine says that, but it doesn't say that here.
Yeah. So some will say many manuscripts right here. Many manufacturers, manuscripts. What is the deal today?
Walk out and come back in.
Exactly. It's worse than holes in your coffee cup. Do not contain the remainder of verses 6 and 7, nor the first part of verse 8. Okay, so
I've got
there's
that
a
written in my footnotes.
right
so
down
it's
here.
down there.
Right, exactly. So always want to look out for that when you're reading scripture, being truthful to the scripture. In other words, you don't want to set your entire life philosophy on a piece of scripture that may or may not be spot on. There's a whole church that handles snakes that are based on Mark, the last part of Mark, and it's scripture that says we can't find this anywhere anymore. So just don't depend your whole life on those kind of scriptures. Oh, anyways, okay. So where am I at? Okay, yeah. So getting a running start on this here. And after 5 days, so what's going on here is that Paul has been sent up to the governor's location, right? To stand a trial, I guess is what you would call it. And so he gets there, and it's 5 days later. Just as a reminder, in 35, he says, I will give you a hearing after your accusers arrive also. So it's taken them 5 days. I guess that's they took their sweet time, because Paul got up there, real quick, a day or so. And
They took him out at night.
They took about at night. I guess maybe they were in
They went to Jerusalem. They had to go from Jerusalem
I guess they were
Caesarea.
riding in the express lane or the carpool lane or something. So you get this Ananias came down. So who's the Ananias? And he comes down with elders. Who's this guy?
The high priest.
Of the Sanhedrin, right? Okay, so that's what's going on here. And then we get this hired gun, a certain attorney named Tertullus, that comes to bring the charges to the governor. So he's an attorney, I think. Others use a different word than
Orator.
Orator, right?
Spokesman.
Right, a spokesman, right?
But what did yours say?
Attorney.
It does say, okay.
Yeah, mine says attorney. All right. Now, he has a Roman name, but probably, most likely, he's a Hellenist Jew. So he's most likely Jewish in culture, but he's tied to the Roman Empire. Kind of like Paul, really. Kind of tied up like that. All right. And after Paul had been summoned, right, been brought in, Tertullus begins to accuse him. So what's the very first thing that Tertullus starts to say?
This is up to the judge.
Yeah, a little bit of brown nosing going on here. How wonderful and great you are. Peace has reigned since you've been here. Never mind all those riots. We don't count those. Peace.
Mostly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful.
Or the crucifixions or anything else.
Yeah, don't worry
about that.
Just minor details. Mine has in verse, well, in the middle of 2, and since by your providence reforms are being carried out for this nation.
Yes.
What reforms? Or is he just kind of like generalizing what's going on here?
Mine says very worthy deeds
Deeds.
are
Right.
done.
Right.
Probably just not a platitude. I think he's
Yeah, like
Brown nosing.
he
All good.
yeah, like all good. He planted, flowers along the main walkway or something, that kind of thing. Okay, carried out for this nation. 3, we acknowledge this in every way and everywhere, most excellent Felix. In this chapters, there's in these next few chapters, actually, Felix, and there will be a Festus individual. Those will be the 2 governors, if you will, that we're going to be involved with. Did some background study on Felix. He ain't a nice guy, basically. Felix, Antonius Felix is his name. He was a former slave, but apparently had his brother up in Rome who was able to purchase him out of slavehood and was able to be assigned to this location.
a slave to who?
He was a slave. So typically, in the term slave, we've got to watch out because every time I think slaves, immediately I go to roots.
Right.
And I go to Africa and stealing people and they become slaves. That is not what slaves were. Most of the time, slaves were bonded individuals. In other words, I'll pay for your room and board and you will work for me for 5 years. And there's a contract that goes on there, that kind of thing. And so that's that kind of a slave. Now, I don't know the background of where he was at, because it could have been he broke someone's property. He couldn't pay for it. He becomes a slave.
Right.
That kind of thing.
So it wasn't necessarily thrown in prison. A lot of times they were given to the
That's correct.
party.
That's correct.
So
That's right.
community service, so
Right.
to speak.
But basically, he was not free to live and go where he wanted to. Right? He was bonded to something. And it was his brother in Rome that had connections to got him out of that and got an assignment here in, I don't know if you'd call it a good assignment or a bad assignment, because it's the Hebrew nation. So,
Right.
trouble.
He might have been a well-respected, educated person.
Felix?
Just because he was a slave
Well,
doesn't necessarily mean.
My
he was
understand was no, absolutely not. And they got him out of Rome as fast as possible.
Yeah.
The brother really got him out of there.
It's the bad brother or cousin that he's doing a favor
Because
for.
apparently he was married 3 times. He married a very young girl, around about 16, who was already married, but kind of stole the woman, his wife, which is called. It's in here. What's her name? Good old what's her name? Priscilla. Yeah, I know it's in here. So Priscilla, Drusilla in verse 24 she's mentioned there, and she's a Jewish girl, and so So he stole her, if you will. I call it stealing, but
Yeah.
got the other man's wife. And he was married. This is his third wife. The commentators talk about how bad he was. He was ruthless. Was not a nice guy whatsoever. It was all anything nice he did was a political reason why. Right?
Yeah.
This commentary says, in truth, the long period of peace under Felix was accomplished by killing everyone who opposed him. But he did a few things that brought peace to the region, like suppressing Egyptian revolutionary and then ridding Judea of robbers. So it sounds like it was that traditional Roman peace, which is under control by the Roman soldiers.
Yeah.
So anytime there's any kind of uprising, it's just squashed out.
Right. And brutal.
Yes.
And we're not.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. So that's who this guy who's this attorney's fluffing up, right? It's this guy.
Was this judge brought in by design just so they could get a conviction or a ruthless conviction on him, or did he already happen to be there? Is that where he naturally presided?
He was over that area.
Yeah.
He was a governor over
He was the
that
governor
particular
of
area.
of that.
I'm
region.
wondering who decided to bring him to this guy.
So the
Let's bring him to
So the commander of the in Jerusalem,
Mhm.
that commander wanted to escalate it up to the next level.
Right.
Okay.
Is
So maybe the commander also had it out for him.
it's a good point.
Well, the
Let's
commander,
give him the problem, right?
if the commander is in some ways working for Felix, probably not directly, he's probably scared of Felix. Like, I'm not going to do anything.
Right. That'd be
Yeah, I
the
was
wrong
gonna-
choice, right?
Bump it up to him, so
Yeah.
I'm going to stay out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He might have been where normally he might have taken care of it himself, one way or the other.
Yeah.
He said, no, I'm bumping it up.
Well, he had to because he was dealing with a Roman citizen now.
Right.
So they had a judicial system just like we have a judicial system. So they had levels of authority and everything like that. So they had to go through the system, to eventually Paul gets all the way to Caesar.
So I don't think the Pharisees were judge shopping. I think it happened naturally on its own, if you will.
Right.
Okay. So for that I might not weary you any further. Just love that. So 5, for we have found this man a real pest. Other translations have a different word than pest. Plague, yeah. I don't know why I like the word plague better, but
Well, it says a pestilent fellow.
a pested up fellow. There you go. And a fellow who stirs up dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and the ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. So,
And keep in mind, that was his main job, was to keep the Jews under control.
yeah. So
And
he's
so the fact that they're saying, hey, he's stirring the pot.
He's stirring the pot. What Matthew was saying about suppressing dissension and troublemakers.
Yeah.
That's going right to the guy who does that.
Was he a ringleader of the Nazarenes, though?
No,
That's right.
no. Do you know that phrase in the Bible? He came from the Nazareth. Can anything good come from
Oh,
Nazareth? That's the reputation that people from Nazarene have, and particularly because Jesus was known to be from there. They've used it as a real big slight. Oh, he came from there. What good can come from that?
The other side of the tracks, so to speak.
Yeah, it's all things bad that happen probably happened because of that.
Yeah.
That kind of reputation, if you will. He stirs up dissension. So he's just making these bold accusations. And that's what an attorney, or if you will, an orator does. Opening arguments are, you state the accusation in bold, broad terms here. You're not really getting into, Joe said, and you will find this witness will prove he did this. He's not doing that. He's just making the accusation in an open air court, if you will. 6, and he even tried to desecrate the temple. And then we arrested him. So, desecrate the temple. Do you remember what that was? if we go back a couple of,
They thought he brought
chapter-
Gentiles into the temple.
Exactly. Yeah, and
Brought Greeks into the temple.
yep, that was that Greek guy.
21, 28.
Yep, 21 and 28 and 29. 29, for they had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, in the city with him, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. So the accusation was, hey, I think I saw Paul bring this guy in. It wasn't, I saw the guy, but, you know, it was I think that was the guy, you know.
You call it hearsay now?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what is the accusation. Then we get into this questionable set of scripture. I don't like saying questionable set of scripture. I really don't like saying that. Because all scripture is inspired by God and is for good, for correction and righteousness. So I always have a hesitation when I want to warn you about this. He even tried to desecrate the temple, and then we arrested him. Yeah, right. We gang mobbed him, right? And we wanted to judge him according to our own law, but that, I'm going to say it this way, but that commander of yours, mine says, but Lisa's the commander came along, and with much violence took him out of our hands. It's like, I don't remember that being that way. Do you?
But also Lysias was not at this hearing. He stayed back in Jerusalem.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing about, let me see if I've covered it here. With much violence, so who has come from Jerusalem to be the accusers? It was Ananias and the Sanhedrin. Were they witnesses at all to any of it? No. Right? They were not at all. They were there in their pre-trial, if you will, or their own little trial. So they're not actually the accusers. In Roman law, if you accuse someone of a crime, and then when you go to court and the accuser is not there, the charge that accuser made is then put on the accuser.
Oh, wow. The
That's-
accuser or the person?
Of the accuser. The
That
accuser
is
is
not
then
there.
charged for what he had charged the other on. That's why, whatever you say, you better be truthful, right? That whole theme of Roman law was very important. And so much so that people knew that you don't just make an accusation without being willing to go to the court to present your proof.
And risk it flipping back on you.
Exactly. So you be careful about what you accuse. Okay, so it's interesting that the real accusers aren't even showing up. And we'll see that later.
Sorry, going back to the law, so if the accuser does not show up, the accused is free?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. It's not the charge, it's the seriousness of the charge. Okay. Let's see. Where was that at? Wanted to judge him according to his own law. But the commander came along with much violence and took him out of our hand. Yeah, I remember that.
When are you trying to throw Lysias under the bus, so to speak?
Oh, yeah. 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 The flaw, Governor, isn't you. The flaw was your lackey, your underlings.
And you told us to take care of it ourselves, and we were trying to.
We were trying to do our best. And so now we're bothering you because, and so,
Roman,
yeah.
He didn't mention that he was a Roman citizen.
Yeah. Yeah.
In his oration.
Yeah, he did not.
And Paul didn't bring it up either. He could have gotten in trouble saying, they tied my hands and all.
Oh, yeah. Paul,
And that would have been
and
bad.
Paul's response from 10 on down, yeah.
Oh.
Absolutely. He could have
Really?
did that. His-
Yeah, but he didn't.
Paul's response is very brilliant, and I wish we'll have time. I don't know if we will or not. 8, ordering his accusers to come before you, and by examining him yourself concerning all these matters, you will be able to ascertain the things of which we accuse him. And then in 9, mine says, and the Jews also joined in the attack, asserting that these things were true. So it's, The attorney's talking, with Ananias and all those Sanhedrin folks probably sitting in the back, shaking their head. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he did. That's it. I could see this mob mentality just sitting back there, shaking their head yes to what the attorney was making.
Yeah, what he said.
Yeah, what he said. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and continue then. 10. And when the governor had nodded for him to speak, Paul responded. So here's the governor, in his high place, if you will. You may now, address. So Paul says, knowing that for many years you have been a judge to this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. Since you can take note of the fact that no more than 12 days ago, I went up to Jerusalem to worship. And neither in the temple, nor in the synagogues, nor in the city itself did they find me carrying on a discussion with anyone or causing a riot. Nor can they prove to you the charges of which they now accuse me. But this I admit to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, I do serve the God of our fathers, believing everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets. We'll stop there for a second. So Paul's response, how is he responding?
I mean, listen, I didn't do it. They can't prove it.
Yeah. What he says is wrong. What he said is wrong. What he said is wrong.
They're lying.
They're lying to you.
They said I did all these things, I was only there 12 days.
Yeah.
How can I do all this?
How can I do all this in 12
How
days?
can I do all this?
So just as equivalent, I guess what Paul is alluding to or getting to here is that you have no evidence of the contrary.
Just accusers, there's no witnesses.
Yep.
There's nothing, no substance to it at all.
Right.
And, this timeline, you mentioned 5 days that he was there, 12 days since he got to Jerusalem to where this is happening. Can't really, I don't know how things are back then compared to now, but that seems a little rushed for a full-on trial of sorts.
Would agree.
But he also addresses the accusation that he's stirring up the Jews by saying, hey, I'm one of them. I serve the same God that they serve.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the reason I was going to Jerusalem, is to worship at the temple for the feast.
Right.
So why would I be stirring them up when I'm actually
Worship.
worshiping the same God that they worship?
Yeah.
This word they're using, sect,
Yes.
that is where the word heresy comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So he's saying this is not a heretical belief. It's the same God, the same scriptures and everything. There's no heresy in here either. So there's the defense of that charge.
Mine says heresy.
Heresy does say heresy.
Yep.
Yeah. You notice the usage of the way,
Yeah.
and as Paul is using or reminding that is what they're known as,
Right.
is the followers of the way. Okay? And what is this way?
All for Christ.
The way, the truth, and the
Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
right.
You know, especially at this time, I know the way we're being persecuted, but whether it was by the Jews or was it by Roman at the time? I'm trying to remember now.
Definitely Jews.
Jews.
Yeah, I know the Jews, but were the Romans involved in
No,
persecuting them at all?
not for a while.
Later they were, I think.
Yeah, well, it just depends on which Caesar you were dealing with, but yes.
You know where I'm going with
Yeah.
this. So, in one hand, you may not want to mention the way, but at this time, I think it was before the Romans kind of started.
Well, remember, the only reason Rome was even interested is because they just need to keep the peace, right?
Yeah.
So as long as there was no riots and anything like that, Rome didn't care.
Yeah.
They had their hundreds of gods. They weren't worried about the way, right? They were much stronger than that. So I think that
Rome
was
had
the
their
main
own
interest.
set of problems,
Right.
besides just the Jews.
Yeah.
Stevenson, the guy that tried to help Paul, was trying to keep peace because of the mob then. All of them wanted, they didn't want any attention brought to them that I'm not keeping the peace.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to dissect verse 14 just a little bit more, which they call I do serve the God of our fathers, believing everything that is in accordance with the law, and that is written in the prophets. So what is the law and the prophets?
Mosaic law.
Okay,
But it says all things, not some of the things.
right.
Or mine does, I don't know if you had that word in yours, but believing all things.
Yeah.
Yeah, believing everything. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So the law was the Torah,
The law was the Torah.
and then the prophets that were, that was the basis of their life, the way
That's
that they lived.
Yep.
Was according to what the Torah said, and then the books of the prophets.
So what are the first 5 books? Right. There's the
Genesis,
Pentateuch,
Exodus, Leviticus.
right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
Right.
Okay. Are the 5, and then the prophets would be
Joshua, is it?
Yeah.
Or the,
Um,
like you have
Psalms.
Isaiah,
Isaiah,
Jeremiah.
right?
First and Second Samuel.
First and Second Samuel, all the kings,
Yeah,
Kings and
Ezekiel.
Chronicles,
right?
Yep.
right? Those will be the books specific to that. More importantly, he'll allude to it. We hadn't read again. These are the books that the Pharisees hang their hats on.
Yes.
The prophets, the books of the law, that would be the Sadducees. That's the only thing they believed was to be referenced, was that.
They didn't believe in the prophets, right?
Did not believe in prophets, didn't believe in the resurrection, didn't believe in spirits and angels and an afterlife, for the most part. That was how the Sadducees were. They're sad, you see.
That's sad, you see.
And so it's important that Paul is stating what he's believing in. There is nothing that he's stated here that was outside, like, I believe that the law is not old-fashioned because Christ came to fulfill the law, therefore it doesn't count. It's not what Paul is saying here. He's saying, I'm believing in the same laws that you guys do.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to stop it here. But I really want to get into having a hope in God and these men cherish themselves. I think we'll do a run-up on this again next week. Okay? So we'll need to stop here at 15 or so. Okay, we'll stop here. Other commentary before I... No? Okay. What are you guys praying for?